Welcome back to the Rules Committee, and without objection, any prepared statement that you have will appear in the record, and we welcome your summary.
Okay. Well, Chairman Dreyer and Ranking Member Slaughter and other members of the committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to come and discuss the rule for H.R. 2401, the Train Act. EPA has been promulgating rules ever since the Nixon administration, but I must say things are very different under this administration. The sheer number and the scope of major rules is completely without precedent. Unfortunately, there has not been sufficient analysis as to the potential adverse impact, the cumulative impact of all these rules. The purpose of the Train Act is simply to provide that analysis and prevent unnecessary economic harm. This common sense goal is even more necessary given the weakness in the economy and lingering high unemployment among the entities targeted by EPA's regulatory agenda. This helps explain why the Train Act enjoys bipartisan support. The Train Act does not necessarily stop any regulation, but it does require a government body group entity chaired by the Secretary of Commerce will fully explore the cumulative impact of all of these rules. And they will be looking at the cost and the benefits, the impact on jobs, the impact on the global economic competitiveness of the United States, energy prices, and energy reliability. All of those things are totally necessary if America is going to compete in the global marketplace, and particularly at a time when we have a very sluggish economy and we're having difficulty creating jobs. So I encourage the Rules Committee to make amendments in order, including mine and others that attempt to improve the bill. Last January, President Obama issued Executive Order 13563 entitled Improving Regulation and Regulatory Review. I applaud the President for discussing in this executive order the need to look at the cumulative cost of regulations. So the President, in his executive order, is calling for this, but EPA has not done it. This legislation simply requires an analysis of the cumulative impact of all of this plethora of regulations coming out of EPA.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Whitfield, and thanks for your stellar work on this. We've got nothing but great reports on the work of your subcommittee, and I think that I know what you're trying to do here, and that is to look at the big picture rather than individually look at regulations, because we know that virtually every regulation out there that we talk about is well-intentioned. I mean, we all like to breathe clean air, we like clean water, but if you look at the burden that has been imposed consistently on those in the private sector, undermining the potential for job creation and economic growth, which continues to be a priority that both parties talk about, something that I think we need to do. And so this is, to me, this is just common sense, what it is that you all are proposing. And I'm very supportive of it, and I hope very much that we'll be able to have a free-flowing debate on it. Mr. Sessions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whitfield, there has been a good bit of discussion about the President's policy, evidently as it emanates itself at, with, and through the EPA about zero growth, what is referred to as a zero growth policy. And the essence of it deals with rules and regulations which inhibit not only the creation of jobs, but place a heavy burden upon job creators and even the government as it complies with or tries to work with, whether it's through the Corps of Engineers or EPA, and how they go about their duties, up to and including permitting processes and others. Do you have any opinion about what the practical effect that this could have upon highlighting these areas for a policy discussion about moving the President closer to a circumstance that would be about job growth and development, where there would be an analyzation when these processes take place about what the impacts would really be?
Well, Mr. Sessions, I think you hit a good point, and that is the majority of America today are facing uncertainty, and if you talk to any businessman, large or small, they will say that uncertainty is the one item that's preventing them from making additional investment. And that uncertainty that they identify is from three reasons. One, the health care bill and the fact that it doesn't go into effect until 2014, the uncertainty surrounding that. Number two, the regulations coming out as a result of the financial reform bill and the additional capital requirements required for loans. There's uncertainty there. And then third, the big thing is these environmental regulations that are affecting every aspect of society. We're actually marking up a bill tomorrow relating to the cement industry alone. And even EPA and all of them are saying that if that regulation goes into effect, they do expect 18 cement plants to close in America and about 100 in this country. So at a time when the President is talking about creating new jobs, wants to build infrastructure, wants to stimulate the economy, these regulations are preventing the economy from moving forward because of the uncertainty. And it's ironic that he's talking about rebuilding the infrastructure, and yet he has a regulation in line that will close down cement plants in America, which means we're going to be importing more cement from other countries, creating jobs there instead of in America.
Well, I agree with you. I'm greatly concerned about it. Texas has, as a result of a ruling by the EPA, been placed in a circumstance that we were not originally in the order for. Perhaps you're aware of it. Whereby we will have to shut down 18% of our electric generation in the state of Texas on or about January 1.
Well, we were all shocked at that decision because
that is devastating to the state of Texas, because it not only were we not a part of the original plan or structure or even testimony, but we were applied in a ruling that completely took us off guard. The problem is the state of Texas is now quickly trying to move to essentially having diesel engines and all sorts of primary businesses that cannot do without a backup system when that backup system may have been affected also. And instead of us getting cleaner air, we'll now have a different source in the cities that to provide care for hospitals, disabled people, people who need these types of constant supplies. And I think it is one of the more interesting negative aspects of the President's plan that will leave us high and dry in the state of Texas, and will at a misery level of January. You'll recall last year we hosted the Super Bowl. One week it was 82, the next week it was 9, and we had 16 inches of snow. And it comes at a time when we are back on our heels in Texas, now trying to make backup plans for something that would make the air less clean, simply because we've got a lot of people that need energy, reliable energy. So I hope that that's part of the analysis, a part of the transparency and regulatory analysis of impacts on the Nations Act of 2011, where you will hopefully have testimony of real live impacts of regulatory analysis. Do you intend to at all get into, and I don't see it here, something called the Corps of Engineers through the EPA?
Well, we have jurisdiction over part of the activities of the Corps, and we do hope to look into some of the Corps activities later on, but it's certainly not included in this legislation.
Not included in here. Well, the reason why I say that is because we have a different problem with the Corps. The Corps, essentially Dallas has been trying to build a levee system. Now the Corps is telling us the difference between what was agreed to and what they now need to do would be about $1 billion extra, which means it will never happen. And so we will fail to even materialize to the level, because we've halted where we were going in the size of the levy. And I think that at some point this federal government is either trying to bankrupt cities or impede progress to make marginal changes over time that we can pay for in an economy that they've helped devastate. And so I will be watching with great interest not only the passage of this bill, but what you're able to do in the Energy and Commerce Committee. And I thank you for being here, and also recognize the gentleman from Illinois, the gentleman, my dear friend Bobby Rush, who he and I greet each other every morning, and I did not see you this morning. Bobby, good to see you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's so good to see you always. You know,
Being president of each other's fan clubs isn't a bad job, is it?
You make my day.
Thank you.
All right, most mornings.
Thank you, sir. I hope, Mr. Rush, that what you're hearing is a concern about a problem that I see in the district and the home state where I'm from, and that we would be able to work together with this administration for the attributes for everybody in this nation. In North Texas, we generally, in our struggle and fight for competition, have chosen that we'd like to see everybody do well and not be parochial about where a new job comes or where a new road is, but rather what's in the best interest of everybody. And I would like to say that as a member of the Texas delegation, it does not make us happy that Texas has created more jobs each of the last 5 years than all 49 other states combined. That is a difficult thing, because it means that our United States somehow had a loss in a community of people, of a building, of an asset where people called home. And a lot of it has to do with regulatory burdens that are placed, taxation policy, and rules and regulations that are placed upon people that force them to move somewhere else. In Texas, we see it a lot where a cow will come up and eat grass on the other side of the fence. And that's exactly what's happening. People are looking on the other side of the fence. And I am worried that we will find ourselves in real trouble unless we're able to solve some of the key components. I think this goes back to a concept of a mission statement that this administration seems to be without. They seem to be without a mission statement of what they're trying to accomplish that's in the best interest of everybody, job creators and others. And Bobby, you've heard me before, but I'm concerned about our children. I'm concerned about my 21-year-old. I'm concerned about my 17-year-old, about what lies ahead for them if we devastate jobs and put things out of reach today. And if there's one thing I'd say, it's this regulatory analysis on impacts of the nation of 2011, telling the story and getting good answers about what is the president's vision. What really is the president trying to do to this country? Because I fail to understand rule after rule, regulation after regulation, new demand. I fail to follow what this president is trying to do with our country. And I think if we're going to give the president credit for being a competent person who can thoughtfully articulate visions, then the president needs to do a better job, because the impact is devastating. You see it in the newspaper every day. You see it in frustrations, and communities are there. And dadgummit, leaders lead. And this Congress, I think, comes to the table every day. We're asking questions. We're not getting answers. So, Mr. Rush, thank you for being here. Mr. Whitfield, good luck and Godspeed. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sessions. I don't know if I should quite take your statement as an apology for taking all those California jobs back to Texas.
I
but
did not refer
No,
to
I
California.
know, but I'm telling you, you didn't have to refer to California. I just know it because you and your governor have done a great job, understandably, because the tax and regulatory burden in the state of California is so overwhelming that I can understand why many would want to move to Texas because of the business-friendly climate that you've created there. And I have to say, whether you had weather problems at the Super Bowl. It was one of the most exciting Super Bowls that I've seen in a hell of a long time. As you said, Mr. Rush has joined us. We're very happy that you're here. We've already begun the questioning. If you have any prepared statement,
I do, Mr. Chairman.
It'll appear in the record, Mr. Rush. And
Mr. Chairman, I do, and I certainly want to thank you, and I want to thank Ranking Member Slaughter and all the members of this august body for allowing me to testify in support of allowing the open rule on H.R. 2401, the Train Act, and also specifically to allow the Rush Amendment to be offered on the House floor. Mr. Chairman, before I go any further, I just want to address a question that my friend, and he is my true friend, we are always glad to see each other in the mornings down in the House gym, and he asked the question of what this president is trying to do. And I say in a nutshell, the president is really trying to reverse some of the atrocious policies that this nation has suffered under the last 8 years of the Bush administration. And so he really tried to dig the country out of a hole. And if we would be honest, we would see that the nation is in a hole. This president didn't dig the hole. He's trying to dig us up out of the hole. But I didn't come to the honor of presidential politics before this committee. I came to try to encourage this committee to to allow an open rule. Mr. Chairman, we know that since the inception of the Clean Air Act, opponents of the law has been exaggerating the cost of implementing the regulations associated with the bill, while downplaying the benefits that the new rules have brought. And I'm afraid that the Train Act that the House will soon be voting on represents yet another example of this type of shoddy, one-way, blindside accounting. This bill would highlight the costs of implementing certain EPA rules, but does not take into account all of the benefits of these regulations, including public health, increased job productivity, or lives saved. So I'm offering an amendment that will correct this mistake. My amendment will add the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, as well as the Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, among others, to the interagency council that this bill would create. Additionally, my amendment will direct the committee to look at important health impacts that will be affected by EPA's proposed rules, including the effects on vulnerable subpopulations, such as the elderly, pregnant women, and populations with pulmonary disease, as well as the environmental impacts on the global climate change and the effect of promoting clean energy jobs and technology. Unfortunately, as currently drafted, this bill does not take into account the positive impacts that EPA regulations have had on our economy, including spurring additional research and development of clean energy technology, instituting higher fuel efficiency standards, and helping make the country less dependent on foreign oil. Peer-reviewed articles in top economic journals find little evidence that environmental regulations have dampened U.S. competitiveness or led to outsourcing. In fact, I must point out that the EPA implementation of the Clean Air Act and its accompanying amendments have been one of the most successful and bipartisan environmental laws enacted in American history. While both direct and indirect employment are taken into account, the environmental protection industry is estimated to have created a range of 3.8 to 5 million new jobs. Promoting cleaner technologies through EPA regulations have the effect of benefiting our citizens with cleaner air, while also creating jobs and investments in our economy. So my amendment would help strengthen this bill by making sure that the panel created to study EPA regulations is objective and is balanced and takes into account both the benefits to the environment and to public health, as well as the cost to industry. Mr. Chairman, I urge this committee to allow an open rule on H.R. 2401, and I also urge all of my colleagues to support my amendment and allow it to be offered on the House floor.
thank you very much, Ms. Slaughter.
I don't have any questions, although I really don't approve of the bill. I have to say that I'm one of those dreaded scientists. I just can't seem to give that up. University of Kentucky. What I think lies ahead for Mr. Sessions' children and all the rest of our children, the born and unborn and the elderly, is more asthma, which is rising already at an alarming rate in children, more COPD, more lung cancer. And I appreciate very much, Mr. Rush, you're putting on the record the fact that the environmental movement has created far more jobs than it's ever caused to go away. And on behalf of all those people in industry who've been wonderful in complying with all those rules, I don't think they want to go backwards. I've not had anybody tell me that they'd like to take off the scrubbers or change what they're doing. But I know the writing is on the wall. And I must say that to try to make EPA the public enemy of America is a little bit hard for me to digest, but I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question for Mr. Whitfield. I've noticed that the committee members are all members of the administration. And I'm wondering if you believe that you can get a fair analysis given the vested interest that these folks have in supporting what the administration is already doing. And I have some concern about that. You have no public members on the committee. I mean, we can look at an 8-ounce glass with 4 ounces of water in it, and we'll see it one way and they'll see it another. What's the rationale for having the committee made up of people from the administration totally?
Well, Ms. Fox, we did consider having members from the public involved in this, and then we got into a discussion about who would be making the appointments and so forth. We feel like that even there have been disagreements, for example, between OMB and EPA, and we feel like that EPA is the extreme in their analysis of the benefits and cost on these. In fact, I asked Ms. McCarthy, who's in charge of air quality at EPA, had she ever considered a regulation at EPA in which cost exceeded benefits? And she said, no, never. We feel like that with the Department of Commerce involved in this, Department of Treasury, it will give us a broader perspective and a more accurate analysis of the actual cost and benefits of these regulations, because they're going to have to look at things that they've never looked at before, like global competitiveness. How does it affect global competitiveness? What is going to be the impact on electricity rates, on electricity reliability, which is becoming more and more of an issue? So we did consider what you brought up, but we finally just made a decision that we thought this was the best, most practical way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no other questions.
Mr. Whitfield, who signed the executive order giving rise to it wasn't an executive order, I apologize, who signed the law giving rise to the Clean Air Act? Do you know?
I think it was maybe George W. Bush, right? First,
No, sir.
or
No, sir, it was Richard Nixon.
Richard Nixon, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I only bring that up for the reason that at the time that this act was signed 40 years ago, our nation was rife with pollution that was detrimental to the health of countless Americans. And over the course of that time, I've had the good fortune, as well as some of you, of traveling in other areas of the world. And I remember being in Poland and going to a place called Levitny. And I'd always read about the Black Forest in Germany. And it was devastating to stand there and to see the super detriment that had been done to the environment in that area. Doug Beawright, a colleague of ours, formerly, that Chairman Dreyer and Pete Sessions and Ranking Member Slaughter and I served with. Doug and I one night were going from Hong Kong to Beijing, and our flight was diverted because of abject pollution that had come into Beijing. And we wound up in Inner Mongolia, and it was only 3 days later before we could get back in there because this dust storm that had arisen on the Gobi Desert had caused all flights in China to be delayed. Several times in this committee, I pointed out to Chairman Dreyer that my mother and father lived and worked in Beverly Hills and Bel Air, California. And I thought at one time that I would actually live in California. And I moved there, and I awakened one morning, and I literally could not open my eyes for the pollution in Los Angeles. The environmental protection regulations have helped with emission standards that I'm sure, had California stayed on the same path that they were on, that you could not, and I've seen it in other places, and in LA at one time and in Xi'an, China, two places I remember putting my hand like this and not being able to see it. Now, I'm curious to understand how having regulations delayed is going to be cost efficient for the government. If we just use coal plants alone, 60% of them already have met and are meeting and prepared to meet the emission standards. What's wrong with the other 40% that they can't do that? Why is it so necessary that we go forward in this manner? Now, mind you, I'm for clean coal. I'm for gas. I'm for energy. But I don't understand the reasoning that allows that it's all right to have these plants continue to pollute. I moved to Nashville. I went to school in Nashville. I remember blowing my nose more times than one and almost had to leave school because of the soot that existed at that time. What part of that don't y'all understand? And why is it that if 60% of the plants can meet these standards, that the other 40% cannot?
Well, Mr. Hastings, first of all, I would say to you that all of us are supportive of the efforts of EPA, and we have been historically, and we recognize that the air has certainly been improved a great deal since EPA was started. What we're talking about today, though, number one, we're not saying you cannot do these regulations, implement these regulations. We're simply saying that because of the economy being what it is, and the testimony that we've heard repeatedly over a series of hearings, for example, just the Utility Act alone, with the air transport rules, they say we'll have a net loss of 1.4 million jobs in America, $17.8 billion in annualized compliance cost, so the feeling is that we need a more thorough analysis of the cumulative impact of about 12 major regulations that have come down, been issued by EPA. And if you, once you look at the cumulative impact, once you do that study and you look at competitiveness, reliability is a big issue. If you try to close down that many coal plants, the reliability is going to be definitely harmed in America. You're going to see more rolling brownouts.
When was the last coal plant closed down?
Well, the Sierra Club sued TVA about 6 months ago, and TVA was notified that they couldn't even hire their own attorney. They would be represented by EPA lawyers and the Solicitor General at the Department of Justice. And because of that, they entered into a consent decree to close 18 power plants at TVA, and then in the consent decree, TVA had to pay legal fees to the Sierra Club amounting to $8 million. So the most recent decision to close down coal power plants was that EPA decision just about 6 months ago.
Has it been implemented?
One of the plants, I believe, has been closed already, and they're in the process. They had a time deadline to close the other.
Bet you that it's on appeal. But that's neither here nor there. Do you believe that the Environmental Protection Agency has cost more jobs than the unregulated market in mortgage debt, or the U.S. trade deficit with China, or the shaky state of European banks that's freezing growth? Do you believe that that is what is really causing our problems in America, is the EPA?
I don't think the EPA was the major cause of a lot of the other problems that we've been facing. There were a lot of factors involved there, but we're talking about from this point forward and trying to create jobs, and we've had witness after witness testify that these regulations will be an obstacle to job creation at a time when everyone, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, wants to create more jobs. And the testimony has shown, I think, quite clearly that this is going to present major problems if we're going to improve our economy.
Gentlemen,
Yes, of course.
just for a second, I just have one question, thinking again about health care costs. Growing up, I was born over in the coal fields. I remember black lung and what we went through there. But have you given any thought in this analysis to what the excess health care cost would be? There was a time in this country, I remember in the 70s, where we had a category called excess deaths, when people in New York City who lived lower levels in apartment buildings and the exhaust from automobiles caused them to die earlier than they might have. Do you have any figures on what it would cost to the medical profession, what the medical cost could be to the United States?
Well, Ms. Slaughter,
by doing away with the
in the analysis conducted by EPA, they did, I can tell you, they went to great detail of calculating the benefits, the health benefits, by stopping X number of premature deaths, by preventing increased asthma and so forth. So we basically have that data.
Yeah.
But, for example, they did not include the cost of the jobs lost in areas like Kentucky and other rural areas that depend a lot upon coal. When they lose their jobs, evidence shows that there's a direct correlation between jobs and economy and health care. They did not include that as an additional cost for the children of those people who lost their job, not being able to have the health care that they would have.
Well, Kentucky's very precious to me. I mean, I'm a native daughter there, and I've always believed, and have reason to believe, again for that science, that my folks in Kentucky can have jobs and breathe at the same time. And I think it's really been pretty lethargic on the parts of many. It's hard for me to care a lot about mine owners. I guess I'll have to admit that ever since that song about Mr. Peabody's coal train has carried away Greene County.
Down by the Green River.
Down by the Green River, the Green River.
Where Paradise
I'll never forget that. Sorry, my son, you're too late in asking. Mr. Peabody's coal train done hauled it away. That's the way we live.
And they still have a lot of coal.
I think we can do better.
Still have a lot of coal in Muhlenberg.
I want the state of Kentucky to do better.
Well, we want to help them do better, and we think this bill will give them more.
Well, not if you're going to make them sick.
I'm sorry?
Not if you're going to make them sick.
Make who? Oh, make sick.
Make them ill. That's
Well, we're
the local
concerned
thing.
about the children of those people who lose jobs and their health as well.
Well, I think we can do both. I think we're in the process of doing both. I find this one of the strangest battles I think I've ever been in.
And that's why I said
Trying to keep people well
we're
is
trying to
the
help
enemy of
them
the
with
people.
this.
Thank you, Mr. Hastings.
Thank you very much, Ms. Slaughter. I was thinking about Tennessee Ernie Ford's. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older, deeper in debt, which brings me to a more pleasant subject. Yesterday was Mr. Scott's birthday, and I didn't reach him as he reached me, but I'll take this opportunity to at least say it, and I'm sure the chairman will more appropriately address it at some point. But his birthday. Yeah. All right, we'll work on that. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment, and I'll wait until the amendment comes to the floor to do the remainder of my testimony. But I can tell you this much. I genuinely do not believe that the Clean Air Act, and I might add, we're just talking about air, but that isn't all that the EPA has done. And even on this subject, President Reagan, the revered president, took executive privileges with reference to the considerable pollution that was ongoing in America. I come from an area where I quarrel a little bit with the nutrient standards of the Environmental Protection Agency. But I quarrel in a way that allows the looking for a solution and not demonizing an agency. It seems to me that what I learned from this, I don't know Ms. Jackson at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I can't deign what is in or is not in President Obama's mind. But one thing I do know, when this body takes it upon itself from either ideological perspective to begin demonizing certain bureaucrats, probably, and in most instances, those bureaucrats have been extremely successful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bishop, and if you would yield to Mr. Sessions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Is it all right with Mr. Bishop to yield to Mr. Sessions?
Obviously, yes.
I appreciate my colleague giving me just a second. There has been a little bit of discussion here, Congressman Rush, about the numbers which you provided, and I'm very favorably inclined to look at those again. I wonder if it would be possible for your staff to provide to me and this committee some backup or detail of the substance behind how you came up with those numbers so that we could accurately tout those also.
Is that the number of jobs you're speaking about in terms of the number of jobs created?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I certainly will. It's well published, and it comes from various expert sources, so we can provide that to you immediately. But I just want to, if I could, just take a moment, Mr. Chairman, if you will allow me. I sit on this Energy and Commerce Committee, and I sit on the Energy and Power Subcommittee. I'm the ranking member there. And it seems to me that there is a systemic campaign to demonize and denigrate the EPA. It seems to me like the EPA is in the crosshairs of the Republican caucus, and it just doesn't make sense, particularly when you've had the support of, as you indicated earlier, most of the major utilities, public utilities in the nation, are very happy with what's going on. My utility, Exelon, don't want to go back. They're very pleased with what's happening. I come from a coal-producing state. I am for a clean coal. All right, and in my wildest moment, if I thought the EPA was in any way hampering the production and job creation capacity, then I would really not be here testifying before this committee. But I just kind of believe, members of the committee and my friend, Mr. Sessions, that America can do both. America can have clean air while also producing jobs. I mean, this is a nation that has shown and led the world. We've got the Chinese and the Indians and all others rushing to our borders trying to find out why is the science, what is the science that will allow them to have clean air and all, at the same time lead in manufacturing and job creation and that type of thing. And I just find it just remarkable as I sit back and watch the assault on this agency. And I didn't, during the years of when President Bush was around, 4 years ago, I didn't see the same assault on the same EPA. We had the Clean Air Act for 40 years, and I didn't see it. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the difference now. And I think I only come up with one conclusion, that there are a few companies in this vast industry who are strategically and in a timely manner trying to take this window of opportunity to try to deny the American people a healthy future and a future with new jobs and with a robust economy. That's the only thing I can come up with. And there are a few people who are trying to hold this nation back, trying to hold back the night, and frankly, I don't think they'll be successful.
Well, Mr. Rush, this is perhaps exactly to the point of me taking just a second here that the chairman and the gentleman, Mr. Bishop, were nice enough to yield me this time for a second.
Yes.
This comes from my perception that there is a hindrance as a result of the EPA that has not only cost us jobs, but a lot of rules and regulations that have placed, as Mr. Whitfield said, us in a circumstance of uncertainty for other people. And this goes straight to my point. I would want to use properly the figures that you gave me. Would you mind rereading the statement that you said? I'm sorry, I'd look to see if I had a copy of your testimony, and in fact, I do not, and nor was it required that I receive that.
I would be glad to.
But you read a statement about the number of jobs that actually have been created. And that's what I'm attempting to focus on so that we're able to amplify that. And then, obviously, my question was, could you please provide me the substance behind that so that I'm able to effectively ascertain more about that? Because I think we ought to tout the number of jobs that the President really is adding in this country, and I just was unaware of it.
Well, Mr. Session, the quote or my exact testimony indicated, and I quote, when both direct employment and indirect employment are taken into account, the environmental protection industry is estimated to have created a range of 3.8 million to 5 million new jobs. And we will provide you with the
I'd appreciate that, sir. Well, absolutely. You know what, Bobby, I think one thing that Dave Dreyer has always been for is a fair presentation,
yeah.
And I believe in that, and that's why I'm simply trying to learn more about the data that encompasses that so that I'm able to effectively see that also. And I appreciate the gentleman very, very much. I yield back my time.
Thank you, and Mr. Bishop, I want to recognize you, but I'd like to say I see we have a number of witnesses who are looking to appear here, and I just wanted to say to the witnesses and to the chairman and ranking minority member of the subcommittee that I'm going to recommend to this committee that we make every amendment in order that has been submitted. You've asked for an open rule. Mr. Whitfield asked for many amendments to be made in order. We're looking forward. I hope that this committee will follow my encouragement to make every amendment in order that is germane to the bill and that complies with the rules of the House. That's my goal. So, Mr. Bishop.
Is that every amendment unless they talk about it?
People are able to infer. Whatever they'd like from what I've just said. I mean, I obviously maybe I'm a little too subtle for you, so that may be it.
The EPA is too subtle for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Whitfield, can I just ask a couple of questions just on procedure of this? How long have you been working on this particular bill? Or not how long, but have you been working on it for a long period of time?
Well, I think we've been working on it since almost the first of the year.
Okay. When it was first introduced, as I'm just kind of going through this, was it introduced as a bipartisan draft?
Yes, we did have bipartisan support.
Okay, and I think it looks like you've had a couple of subcommittee hearings
Yes.
on the working draft as well as the revision of it.
Yes.
The final vote that took place on this bill, was it also a bipartisan vote?
Yes, sir.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm enjoying the opportunity to serve as the ranking member on the August Rules Committee, albeit temporarily. Well, I'll never forget on Mr. Webster's first day, he had the opportunity to chair this committee, a meteoric rise. But I appreciate I believe my first opportunity to serve as ranking member. And I believe that in following Mr. Bishop's question, in the committee vote, to be clear, the opposition to this measure was bipartisan. Is that correct?
The opposition?
Yes, the no votes were bipartisan. There were Democrats and at least one Republican that voted no on the committee. Is that correct?
I don't remember. Do you remember who voted?
Yeah.
Yeah, one Republican.
So, yes, I appreciate the gentleman from Utah pointing out the bipartisan nature of the opposition to this bill, which in my mind is a terrible bill. I think what's critical is that there is a cost-benefit analysis of regulations, and I think there's broad agreement about that. There's no disagreement that regulations have a cost. I mean, everybody agrees they have a cost. They also should have a benefit. The benefit should outweigh the cost. The problem with the procedure as proposed is to, in fact, bypass the significant analysis, including the cost-benefit analysis that's done in the course of evaluating regulations, and look simply at the cost side without the recognition that the benefit may, in fact, be better. I guess I would ask the gentleman, is there a two-part question? Is there a problem with the current analysis that goes into regulations, including cost-benefit analysis? And if so, which I assume is the premise of the bill, why is there not an effort to improve the objective nature, scientific validity of the cost-benefit analysis rather than try to do an end run around it with a strictly cost analysis?
Well, first of all, in the hearings that we had, and we had a lot of them, the evidence was quite clear, and EPA did a very thorough job at looking at the value of health care benefits. But on the cost side, and the impact specifically on the economy, like electricity reliability, the impact it would have on that, electricity prices, competitiveness in the global marketplace, that was not considered at all. So we feel like if you're going to have this multitude of regulations before they actually take effect in this climate that we have today with such high unemployment, that we should look at all of these factors before we move forward.
Yeah, what it seems like under this bill, it leaves the existing process in place and then sets up a new process with another level of evaluating regs before they're finalized. It seems like, and I'm not a member of the committee jurisdiction, I wasn't a part of the hearings, I have no doubt that our regulatory process can be improved. I think there's broad agreement with regard to that. It would seem like the process to improve is the process that leads up to the regulations being created, including the quality of the analysis. If there's a problem with the objectivity of the analysis, that would be there to improve rather than a process that strictly looks at cost after all of the initial analysis has gone into creating the regulations in the first place. I mean, if regulations are going to be nullified in that last stage, why aren't they caught earlier, and why are they even proposed? Because we have a significant process, as the gentleman knows and has provided oversight for, a significant process leading up to the regulations. So why this interest in this kind of after the fact rather than the formation of regulations?
Well, as you know, these regulations, when they go through EPA, we're never certain what the final analysis is going to be, what the final regulation is going to be. So as they work their process, they change frequently, which makes it very difficult for people to make decisions about investing, for example, to meet the requirements. And so they had already moved, the EPA administrator had made it very clear that on a date certain, she was going to be making these rules final. So we felt like that it was imperative that before that happened, we have a more thorough analysis. on all sides of that issue.
Sure. I would hope that, again, I think there would be the opportunity to improve the process in a bipartisan way that perhaps wouldn't have bipartisan opposition as well, to ensure that the cost of regulation is less than the benefit. I mean, that's certainly the goal. And as has been pointed out in testimony here today, and I'm sure before your committee, the benefits are not strictly health. There are also economic benefits. There's health-related benefits. There's job-related benefits. There's a variety of benefits and a variety of costs, no doubt, as well. So I'm not a supporter of the bill in its current form. As the ranking member, I do want to express my appreciation to the chair for making proposing to make the amendments in order that are germane under this, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whitfield, I've made a commitment to folks back home that I was going to try to read all the legislation that came across the desk, and we've done a remarkable job in this Congress of keeping things pretty brief. Most of the bills I see are under 10 pages. You get up to 14 in this particular mark, but I still got through those 14 pages. But I'm wondering if I have the most recent version here, because I hear folks talking about dismantling the EPA and demonizing the EPA. All I see in here is a discussion of costs and benefits and a multi-jurisdictional committee that does that. Is there more that goes to the heart of what EPA does and gets them out of the protecting the environment business?
No, there is not.
Maybe the newer version then speaks to what my friend Mr. Polis was talking about. The version I have says that as this multi-jurisdictional panel gets together, that they must consider the cumulative costs and cumulative benefits. Have we now stricken the benefits part of that?
No.
So this is a committee then that gathers to decide both the costs and the benefits of these regulations.
Correct.
Well, maybe is there then a part that says if the costs do outweigh the benefits, though, we're going to prevent the implementation of that regulation?
No.
So we're looking at both sides, the cost and the benefits. We're not changing the jurisdiction of the EPA at all. And even if this committee comes back and says it's an awful cost-benefit analysis, it does nothing to change the impact of that. It's just providing information to the public so that we can make the best decisions. Well,
Yes.
I've only been here 9 months, Mr. Whitfield, but where does the bipartisan opposition to providing more information to the American people come from?
Well, maybe Mr. Rush may be able to answer that question. better than I.
I certainly am glad to be recognized, and let me just inform the committee. It is my understanding that as of last night, that there is a new Whitfield amendment that never went through the committee process. And I think that under the new Whitfield amendment, I'm not sure if that's the amendment that you holding in your hand or whether or not there's a newer version of it. But there's been an editing and a new amendment that Mr. Waxman and I are looking at, and we'll have a letter on the way to Mr. Whitfield, really objecting to the fact that this new amendment never did go through any kind of committee process. And I understand under the new amendment, the Whitfield amendment nullifies the cross-state air pollution rule and mercury air toxics proposal, requiring the EPA to start from scratch on both of these rules. Now, if that's not drastic, and if that's not fatal to the effectiveness of the Clean Air Act, I don't know what is.
But, Mr. Rush, I thought I understood your testimony to be that you encouraged an open rule so that all amendments like that could be offered.
Well, but we also, you asked me a question, and I'm speaking in terms of the Whitfield amendment that is before the committee.
Are you saying
I have an amendment also, But I just think the committee this committee ought to be aware that obviously there are two Whitfield amendments. There's an older Whitfield amendment, and then there's a newer Whitfield amendment. And the latest Whitfield amendment has some provisions in that I'm not certain that you will agree with, or I certainly don't agree with. I'm not certain that the chairman will agree with. I'm not certain that anybody, because if we're all saying that the EPA that it should have standards, it should regulate the environment, it should enforce the Clean Air Act, then according to the latest information that I have, I certainly don't think that you would be in favor of nullifying the cross-state air pollution rule and mercury air toxics proposal, and require the EPA to start all over again. I mean, that speaks directly to the health concerns, health needs, and I might add, my friend Pete, Mr. Sessions, you know, your children, my children, our grandchildren could be affected by the mercury air toxics proposal. That's not the only thing that it does. It prohibits the EPA action and implementation of the rules for a much longer period compared to the bill that we passed out of committee.
Well, understanding that Mr. Whitfield may not get your support on that amendment, you do support his being able to offer that amendment, and we'll just debate the merits of that on the House.
Will the gentleman yield?
Floor.
Will the gentleman yield? If I could briefly also address the gentleman's initial comments and the cumulative benefit language, if the gentleman would entertain that. I think the issue at stake are the directions that are given to the committee, and they're very specific with regard to the costs. If you look on page 6 and 7, the contents, while it lists other cumulative costs and cumulative benefits, it then goes on to look at the factors specifically that the committee must examine, including changes in fuel prices, changes in electricity prices, changes in state employment, adequate power supply, effect on small businesses, consumers, all valid. Not a single criteria is listed. Effect on cancer rates, effect on birth mutations, effect on asthma. Those would be examples, and I believe some of the amendments address that, of why this is currently lopsided, because the instructions of the committee, the requirements of the committee, because the word shall is used, are specifically around these cost elements as opposed to the benefit elements.
Now, reclaiming my time, to be clear, are you opposing any of those things? I mean, the bill is asking that the American people be made aware of how this will impact energy prices. I suspect you support that. How will it impact fuel prices?
Well,
I suspect you support that. Well, let me just finish, because you got a good list of things in there. I agree. The bulk power supply goes directly to job creation, small businesses.
Gentlemen, yield for an answer.
What it does to regional economics. And I know you to support most
Those
of
those are all valid considerations of the cost of regulation. Likewise, there's a whole litany, asthma, cancer, birth defects, that are associated with the benefits of regulation, and those are the two that need to be weighed. Currently, the costs are explicitly given as criteria that must be considered by this committee, and the same treatment is not afforded the benefits of regulation. Yield back.
And I appreciate what the chairman said about being able to include all the amendments that were offered, because I do see some amendments that go to exactly what you're talking about, adding some more specified criteria to the benefit side. And I would hope if folks are able to pass those amendments that we would see the same kind of enthusiastic support on the floor that we're seeing in committee. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You are going to make all the amendments?
I'm not going to do it on my own.
Well, I know that. You're going to propose and recommend that we make all these amendments, including the two that I guess they would be titled Solendra amendments that want us to check into the clean.
You want to have a free-flowing debate on every issue that's brought forward.
That'll be an interesting debate on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webster. Gentlemen, let me say that it's my hope that we'll be making both of your amendments in order. It'll be up to this committee, but that's what I'm going to recommend. And I thank you both for being here, and you've represented your positions extraordinarily well, so thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see that we had Ms. Jackson Lee here. I guess she's left. And Ms. Richardson is here. Let me just say, before you come to the table again, I'm going to recommend that your amendment be made in order, and it'll be an opportunity for you to offer your amendment on the House floor. And I hope you don't say anything that would convince my colleagues not to support me in my request to make your amendment in order.
Is that acknowledging me, Mr. Dryer?
Excuse me?
Is that acknowledging me to speak, Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank you for being here to hear us out as members. I'm going to actually condense my comments in light of what you said in respect to all of you and the time that you've provided. I actually am not going to get into the weeds of your support or non-support of this bill. I just want to bring something to your attention. Last year, I brought forward the authorization of DERA, which is a very important program, a diesel emission program that helps companies. If we're going to talk about the problems with regulatory issues, certainly we wouldn't want to cut a program that actually helps companies to meet these regulations so they can reduce emissions. And that's exactly what this funding source is attempting to do. And so what I don't want to have happen is every time we're looking to fund a program, we use DERA as a whipping boy to fund it instead of actually looking at some programs that maybe should in fact be cut. This program has already been cut by 53, and so when you consider that, I think for us to be taking another chop at it is just really not in the way we need to go. Ms. Blackburn had actually brought up an amendment earlier in the year to completely cut this program, and you guys overwhelmingly bipartisan supported the continuation of this program. So it just seems like somewhat inconsistent that in one way we all realize the value of the program, and yet we're supporting legislation that in fact is doing the exact opposite. Mr. Sessions, you asked a question about jobs, and I just wanted to point out to you that this program, for every dollar that's spent in DERA, it's believed that $13 is given back in terms of health and economic benefits. Specifically regarding jobs, the EPA estimates that DERA saves more than 3.2 million gallons of fuel annually, which means that truckers and other diesel operators will spend $8 million less on fuel. These are the kinds of things DERA since 2007 has helped to fund over 3,000 projects, which has people working. So my only concern, and as I said, I'm not going to get into the weeds of your support or opposition to the bill. I just hope you would join me on the floor with your colleagues to really start saying that we've got to stop using DERA as the method to do funding for programs going forward.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Richardson? Thank you very much for being here. We greatly appreciate it.
I had one last question for you, Mr. Dryer. When I was last here, I didn't recognize that picture that was up there, so I thank you for bringing a little of California to the Rules Committee. It's very nice.
Very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you all, gentlemen.
Meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. That will conclude the hearing for consideration of this measure. And let me just say that we're going to recess and then reconvene, we hope at the beginning of the last vote. We're dealing right now, as you know, beyond the train legislation with the continuing resolution and questions as it relates to the Senate, and so we will make a determination then as to exactly how we'll resolve this. Mr. Hastings.
Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit my statement in support of the amendment.
Without objection, Mr. Hastings' statement will be included in the record, and we'll look forward to having your amendment considered on the floor if the committee decides to support your effort here. You say we're coming back after the last vote. Thank you all very much. The committee stands in recess. know that in your absence, he was the ranking member, and he had in his mouth so full of food. I called on him. He just had a seal in his throat, and I called him out. I called him out on it. The Rules Committee will reconvene. Thank you all very much for your patience. As you know, we received a request that came from the Majority Leader, Senator Reid, and the Minority Leader in the Senate, Senator McConnell, to allow us to proceed with a continuing resolution that would accommodate the Senate meeting that they wanted us to consider amendment rather than the vehicle that we had last week. And so that's the only change that we are making on this. So let's begin with the chair will be in receipt of a motion. Which we're starting with here? The Train Act?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're on the Train Act.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee report structured rule for consideration of H.R. 2401, the Transparent and Regulatory Analysis of Impacts on the Nation Act 2011. The rule provides 2 hours of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce now printed the bill shall be considered as an original bill for the purpose of amendment and shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those amendments printed in the report accompanying the resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, shall not be subject to a demand for the division of the question. All points of order against the amendments printed in the report are waived. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instruction.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman from Dallas, and as I said when we were in the hearing, I hope very much that the committee will be supportive of our effort to make every amendment that complies with the rules of the House in order. And as Ms. Slaughter and I have just discussed, it's all amendments except for the Lowy Amendment, which was a violation of the Cut-Go and the Budget Act. And any discussion or amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr.
I have no discussion, Mr. Chairman.
We make the Hastings Amendment in order, of course, as you noted.
Yes, I'm
Sure.
aware. I just ask unanimous consent that Sheila Jackson Lee's statement in support of her amendment be made.
We're very appreciative of the fact that Ms. Jackson Lee's statement is being submitted for the record. Any amendments? If not, the vote occurs on the motion of the gentleman from Dallas. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Aye. Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. And Mr. Bishop is going to be managing this rule for the majority, and the chair will, and Mr. Hastings for the
whole lot of
Democrats.
Baseball anecdotes.
Thank you. We'll look forward to it. And we hope there will be no more singing, as we had from both the ranking member and the gentleman from Fort Lauderdale as well. Chair will be in receipt of a second motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant a rule providing for the consideration of H.R. 2608, the Small Business Program Extension Reform Act of 2011, and the Senate amendment thereto. The rule makes an order, a motion offered by the chair of the Committee on Appropriations that the House concur in the Senate amendment to the bill with the amendment printed in the Rules Committee report. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the motion. The rule provides that the Senate amendment and the motion shall be considered as read. The rule provides 1 hour debate on the motion equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member on the Committee on Appropriations. Finally, the rule provides that H.Res. 399 shall be laid on the table.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman. Let me just explain again. We reported out the rule last week, as you all know, that Mr. Woodall is going to be managing. And over the past few days, a request came in from the bipartisan leadership of the Senate that they wanted us to consider this as an amendment so that they could move expeditiously. We all know that the continuing resolution needs to be addressed. And we did put the text of the modification online yesterday, so we'll be in full compliance with the 3-day layover requirement. And we hope that we can move to the floor and have strong bipartisan support for the effort. Any amendments? If not, the vote occurs on the motion of the gentleman. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Pin the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sure. Of course. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions.
Aye.
Mr. Sessions, aye. Ms. Fox. Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, aye. Ms. Slaughter. Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
Aye. And the clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 2 nays.
And the motion is agreed to, and as I said, Mr. Woodall, the gentleman from Lawrenceville, Georgia, will be managing for the majority, and Mrs. Slaughter for the minority. Thank you all very much. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned. Okay.